welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today, relationship life coach Cindy Chavez. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And happy warm Wednesday to everybody. That's what it is here in Connecticut today. We are experiencing temperatures in the 60s in February, and we're kind of like chuckling at that because that's not the norm around here. And then tomorrow we're going to be down in the 30s, expecting about 2 to 4 inches of snow. So this is kind of an interesting time, but that's all right. We're persevering. Welcome to another episode. We do have a little sad news today. Jackie Gates has decided that she needs to back out of the show, which is really sad because she's been a wonderful addition and we're going to miss her greatly, but we shall persevere. Yeah. She's really something special, but we do have a special guest today. That also helps to increase the speciality. His name is Dave Combs, and Dave has a really interesting story to tell because, among other things, he did something that many people would have trouble doing. He managed to make an entire career as a musician, as a pianist, and he managed to do it during the era of rock and roll, and he managed to do it without writing a rock tune, and he actually was successful at it. I mean, that's a major breakthrough right there. That's really something. So, Dave, welcome to the program. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Walt. Thank you for having me. We're going to have a lot of fun this afternoon.
We certainly are.
Yeah.
Well, that's the rule. We actually passed a law that said you have to have a daily dose of happy every single day. So, yeah. I'm glad to know that you obey the law.
One of my previous hosts on a podcast I was on, she asked me what my mission was, and I rambled on a little bit, and then she says, "No, Dave, I think your mission is to spread happiness." I said, I like that. So I have kind of adopted her mission of saying my mission is to spread happiness through my music and my writing.
Sounds good to us. I mean, really, that's great. Plus, you're also speaking to people here. Cindy and I both have some background with the keyboards, so you're talking to somebody who has a little bit of knowledge of what you're dealing with there. And I mean, both of us know that's not an easy career to get going. So tell us about it. How did that get going?
Well, I was born in a musical family. I grew up around music in church and at home. Both my parents played the piano. My grandmother Combs, she was only 4'8" and born in 1894. So she was a little lady, but she could make some music. She played the old pump organ, if you're familiar with that. Yeah, it was an old instrument that before they had electricity, you just pumped the air with your feet and made the organ make its music. And she also loved to play the instrument called the autoharp, which Mother Maybelle Carter, I think, made it famous and whatever. But it's a beautiful instrument, the stringed and with chords. And so I grew up around that all my life. And I went to work. I went to college at ETSU, East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, got my math degree and physics minor, and I did computer programming. My first job was as a computer programmer for Western Electric, and which later became AT&T. So my life has been around technology most of my working life. But in the evenings and on weekends, one of my hobbies has been music, and I have loved music. And it was in 1981 that I sat down at my piano, like you would sit down at a keyboard. Both of you, I'm sure, have done this. You just sit and I call it doodling, or just mess around, play some chords and just not even have a thought in mind about what you're playing. You just play something. And that time I had just finished tuning up my 100-year-old Knabe grand piano. Now, a 100-year-old piano won't hold its tune very well.
No.
So I bought a tuning hammer, and so I would tune my piano back up to where it sounded halfway decent. And then when I finished tuning it, I would always sit down and play something. And I always loved to play something really pretty, play pretty chords, either whether it's a C, A minor, F, and G kind of progression, or just something. But this particular time, and it was in January of 1981, I sat down at my piano after tuning it, and I put my fingers on there, started in the key of C, and I just started playing. And I started playing this song that, to me, I really didn't realize it. It sounded like a song that I'd heard a million times, but it really was a song that I was just playing for the very first time. And I really think, Walt and Cindy, that this song was a gift to me from on high. It was inspired by the good Lord. And so I sat there and I played this song all the way through the verse part of it. And then I played the chorus, and then I played it again, and it all hung together, and it never changed. And a couple of days later, my wife Linda came home from work, and she says, "Dave, what is the name of this song that I've got stuck in my head?" You know how that happens. You hear a song, and then you go walk away and you hum it all day long in your head. Well, she says, "What is this?" And she hummed a little bit of it, and I said, "Well, Linda, it doesn't have a name." And she says, "What? You play it all the time on the piano. It's got to have a name." I said, "No, it's just something I made up." Well, she got all excited. She said, "Well, have you written it down and on a piece of paper?" I said, "No, I've got it up here." She said, "No, that's not good enough. Something might happen to you. You might get run over by a truck and it'd be gone." So I said, "Okay." So I wrote it down. So this was in January of 1981. Fast forward a couple of years, some good friends of ours had a little baby girl, and her name was Rachel. And so Linda and I were asked to be her godparents, which of course we lovingly accepted. And at her christening service, this was not planned. At the end of the service, there was this beautiful grand piano sitting at the front of the church. And it was just us and the family. And I punched Linda. I said, "What about now playing this little song that I have written?" And she said, "I don't know. Okay, let's ask." So I asked the family, and they said, "Sure." Went up to the piano, sat down. Everybody sat back down, and I went to the piano and I started playing. And I played this melody, and about halfway through it, I hear in the audience little sniffles here and there. And then I noticed on my cheeks, I was having a few little wet spots coming out of my eyes. My eyes were leaking. And, so by the time I finished the song, it was really an emotional experience. And when the last notes were sounding to silence, I looked over at where little Rachel was being held in her mother's arms. And I said, "From now on, this song will be called Rachel's Song in her honor." So the name of the song it just fit perfectly, and everybody loved the song, and it was just wonderful. Now, that was in 1983. Fast forward to 1986. I was working for Western Electric at the time and having to do a lot of traveling. One of the places, fortunately, this was kind of a God wink too, I think, that one of the places that I traveled to was Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh.
Well, Nashville, Tennessee is Music City, USA. It is, and it earns its reputation. So Linda says, "Well, while you're working there during the week in Nashville, why don't you find you a studio and a musician and get a demo recording of Rachel's song made, something we can have and give to Rachel and her family to enjoy."
Sure.
So I said, okay. So one night after work, I'm driving around Nashville. And if you've been to Nashville, there's a place called Music Square. It's a square, some square blocks that everything in it has to do with music. There's BMI and ASCAP and recording studios and RCA and everything's in there. So I'm driving around about 6 o'clock or so. Now in Nashville, that time, as we say down here in North Carolina, they rolled up the sidewalks at 5:30. Everything looked like it was closed.
Right.
So I'm looking for a studio, and I round the corner down at Roy Acuff Place, and here is an old barn-looking kind of building with a water wheel out front. And the sign on this building says the Music Mill. Well, I said, that's encouraging. So I went around the corner. Sure enough, there's a car in the parking lot. And so I pulled in the gravel lot and got out and knocked on the door. And this gentleman came to the door and unlocked it. And he says, "Hi, I'm George Clinton. Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Dave Combs. I'm looking for a studio where I can get a demo recording made of a song that I've written." And about the time the words got out of my mouth, I realized that I was probably where I needed to be, because up on the wall of this lobby were great big pictures of Glenn Campbell and Alabama, the Forrester Sisters, gold records, platinum records, all over the place. And George says, "Well, Dave, you're in one." So here I am in a studio, and George graciously gives me a tour, because I've never been in a recording studio in my life. He gave me a tour of the place. Nobody happened to be recording at the time. And I was just blown away. And I said, "George, how much does a place like this cost to rent?" He says, "This is $125 an hour plus engineer. Now, remember, this was 1986.
Yeah, that was a piece of change.
That was a piece of change. So I said, "Whoa, man, that's kind of expensive." And he said, "Well, don't worry. The fellow that owns this also owns a little one across the street. It's in a little former little house that they've converted into a studio." I said, "Well, how much is it?" He says, $25 an hour plus engineer. I said, "That's my place." So anyway, I said, "Now all I need is a musician, a piano player to play my song I've written, Rachel's song." He thought a minute. He said, "I think I know just the person. Let me look him up." And he went over to his Rolodex. Now, some of the people, young folks, won't know what a Rolodex is. It's a piece, it's an electronic contact file. But he looked up the name and phone number of Gary Prim. He said, "I think Gary Prim is the right person for you to call." So he wrote his number and name down and gave it to me on a piece of paper. I said, "Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it." So I left and went right back to my hotel and called Gary Prim and got his answering machine. And I told him what I wanted, and he called me back. So I had to hang around the hotel. Now, this is before cell phones. If you wanted a phone call, you were stuck to wherever the landline was. You got to wait. So I waited. I couldn't even call Linda and tell her what I was up to. I was waiting on Gary's phone call. Didn't want him to get a busy signal.
Gotta keep the line open. Yeah.
Keep that line open. So about 30 minutes here, the phone rings and it's Gary. And he says, "This is Gary Prim. Can I help you? What can I do for you?" And I told him what I wanted and so forth. He said, "Oh yeah, I can do that." He said, "Just send me a cassette tape of you playing it on the piano so I'll know kind of what it sounds like, and send me a lead sheet." I said, "Okay, what's a lead sheet?"
What's a lead sheet?
And he thought, "Uh-oh, which turnip truck did this guy get off of?" You know. Oh my. So anyway, he says, "Oh, it's the melody and the chords on music score." I said, "Oh, I've got that. I just didn't know what to call it." So when I got back home, sure enough, I made a cassette of me playing it and sent him a copy of the lead sheet. And then a couple of weeks later, Gary and I met in this tiny little studio across the street from the music mill. And it was like 6:00, and Gary comes walking in with his Yamaha DX7 synthesizer. It's a keyboard, a small one, and under his arm. So he comes in, introduces himself. Fine young man, really friendly. One of those people, instant friends, you just instantly connect with somebody. So he brings his synthesizer in, and there's a Yamaha baby grand piano in this little studio, and me and the engineer. And so Gary's goes right to the piano to kind of test it out to make sure it's in tune and get the feel of the keyboard. And I'm in the control room with the engineer. And so Gary says, "Well, I'm ready." So the engineer says, "All right, I'm ready too." He pushes the record button. Now this is recorded on 2-inch reel-to-reel, 30-inch per second tape. Now you've seen big, heavy reels.
Very high quality.
And a full reel would only record 13 minutes of music. I mean, it's flying around. So he says, "I'm ready." So he pushes record and says, "We're rolling." And so Gary starts playing my song, and I'm not believing my ears. This is unbelievable. I've only heard me play it before. Well, he gets halfway through it, and then he kind of stops. He goes, boom, 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 stop. He says, let me start over. I need to, let's do it. Roll it back and let's do it again. So we roll it back and push record again, and we're rolling. So Gary plays Rachel's song on the piano all the way through. And it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I thought, wow, this is just amazing. But then Gary says, "Well, I'm not through. I think this song needs I want to parallel some of the piano part on an electric piano, double it with an electric sound. That'll make it sound fuller. And I want to add some low strings and some high strings and maybe some horns there in the middle when it changes key." I said, "Oh, wow, okay." So he sets up his synthesizer. They didn't even have a thing to put it on. They had to get an old Apple crate, I think, to set it on. This was low budget recording studio. Anyway, so he puts on his headset so he can listen to the piano part on himself, so he can play along with himself, and they do multi-tracking. So he plays the electric piano part, and I couldn't believe how he could exactly match the notes he had just played on the piano, which were his out of his head arrangement, but he played it on the electric keyboard no, just exactly. I mean, when you hear the recording, and the recording you'll hear of Rachel's song is that original demo recording. It is not changed. So listen to how carefully he matched the electric piano with the real piano. And then we added 2 more tracks put some low strings in there to give the thing, as he said, give it some bottom. And so he added some low strings, and he said, I need some little high strings to make it really give it a little ethereal feel up here at the top. So he did that. And then in the middle of it there, he added a little horn thing to when the key change from C to D flat. And he did all that. And he said, well, I think that's going to do it. And so it had been about maybe 45 minutes to an hour. That's all it took. So I wrote him a check, thanked him profusely, and said goodbye, and had no idea to ever see him again or nothing. But so I thanked him, and then the engineer and I stayed there, and he mixed it down to 2-track stereos to get the balance of all the instruments just right. And then he made me, I think it was 3 or 4 cassette tapes of the 2-track stereo, and a reel-to-reel 1/4-inch, 15-inch per second master tape that you could use to make records from.
Sure.
So I paid the engineer for his time in the studio, and I got my cassettes, and I went out in my rental car in the parking lot. And of course I couldn't wait to hear it again because
right.
I'm still just I don't know where I was. I was in cloud 9, I think. I put that cassette in the player in my car and sat there in the parking lot and just turned it up and just listened to it. This is it. I kept saying to myself, this is it. Now, I didn't know what it was, but I knew this was something special. This was it. So I got out on the interstates. Now, if you've driven around Nashville, Tennessee, you know there's about 3 interstates that converge or get together, converge there. It's I-24, 40, and 70. Anyway, there's 3 of them. And there's a network of interstates there that a certain part of it, if you're not in the correct lane, you are not going to go where you think you want to go.
Yes.
And so I'd play the music, and then I'd rewind it and play it again, rewind it and play it again. And after a while, I looked up and I said, gosh, I've seen that billboard, I think at least twice. You know what had happened? I just gone completely around Nashville. I just was circling. I was on another planet. Might as well be. Well,
Right.
my navigation finally did kick in, and I got back to my hotel, and I called my wife, and this is before I had any way of playing it for her. I couldn't even play it on the phone. I didn't even have a cassette player in the hotel room.
Right. Yeah.
Well, she must have thought that I had been drinking or something, because I was so excited. I said, you're not going to believe what you're going to hear with this song. And so she was so excited. And then after I hung up talking to her, I said, I've got to play this for somebody. And I was so intent on playing it for somebody. I didn't care who. I went down and found at the shopping center a Circuit City, which sells stereo equipment. I walked in Circuit City and found me a salesman, and I said, could you show me your best sounding speakers and cassette player here? And he said, yeah, sure. And he walked me over. I said, here, and take this cassette. Put this in there. Let's turn it up. Let's see what it sounds like in here. Oh my goodness. Well, what happened was really it kind of surprised me, kind of didn't. Every customer in that store, when that music started playing, just went, what is that music that is playing? It kind of was like a Pied Piper thing. They all wanted to know, what is that music? Well, that was another confirmation that I really had something special. But that was funny. I don't know I have no idea who heard that song that night, but they got to hear it the very first time. But I finally did make it back to Winston-Salem after working there in Nashville, and played it for Linda for real. And then I played it for a friend of ours, Bob McHone, who is a wonderful voice person. He's a radio personality, and he had a radio program on Saturdays. It was a big band jazz radio program, like 3 hours, where he played pretty jazz music. Well, I was having lunch with Bob. I think it was on like Wednesday of that week I got back, and I was telling him about the recording of Rachel's song, and he said, well, man, I got to hear this. Let's go over to my office and you play it for me. So I did. And he sat there, and I looked over at Bob, and he was just, he had his eyes closed, and he was listening to Rachel's song, and tears were coming down his cheeks, and he said, and I could just hear, he didn't say any words. You could hear I guess it's the universal approval sound. It's the, it's like when you got a great supper or something, you take your first bite of that great meal and you just go, Well, I knew, he said, Dave, you have got to let me play this on my radio program on Saturday.
Oh.
I said, well, okay, all I've got is this, reel to reel 1/4-inch tape of it, the master tape. And I said, that's it. He said, I'll take good care of it. So I gave him the master tape, and he took it to Greensboro where they had the radio station, and they made a copy of it, of course. Back then they made something called a cart, which was like an 8-track thing. They just pop them in and play it.
Right.
But it was high quality, but they made a copy of it. And sure enough, on Saturday morning in Bob's program, he comes on, very first thing. He didn't even wait to play any jazz music. He says, this morning we're going to do something different. He said, I'm going to play a song for you from my dear friend Dave Combs. And it's called Rachel's Song, and I think you'll enjoy it. And it was even more eloquent saying it than that, but because he has a great radio voice. And then he played Rachel's Song, the first time it had ever played on the radio. Well, Linda and I were at home listening to it on the radio, and I have even a cassette tape recording of him doing that. But we were just so thrilled to hear my music played on the radio.
Sure.
Well, a funny thing happened. It wasn't about, I guess, an hour later, my phone rings, and it's the station manager of the WKLM, the radio station, where he played it. And he says, Dave, I've got to tell you, I've been in the radio business for over 20 years, and something just happened here that I have never experienced in my entire life. He said, as soon as Bob played that Rachel's Song, our phones just locked up. I mean, every line, I think they have, 8 or 10 phone lines that people can call in, lined up, said, play that song again. What's the name of that song again? Tell me more about that guy Combs from Winston-Salem. He said, I've never seen this. He said, this is amazing. He said, we'll be playing this song a lot. And that radio station played my music probably at least once every hour.
Wow.
From that point on, once they had it into all their programming was with a live host. They had a morning show person and an afternoon show person, but they all put that card in. They'd all play. Rachel's Song was always in rotation just about every hour. Many mornings, Linda and I woke up with our clock radio playing Rachel's Song. Now that's a thrill. That was a thrill. But that was another confirmation, along with everything else that had happened, that this song really was something special that I needed to do something with. You talk about the law of attraction and how that works. That song attracted an unbelievable number of people to the music and then eventually to me. And it just exploded. It just grew like crazy.
That's fabulous.
I got it played on every easy listening station in the entire United States. That took a lot of work. Back then we didn't have the internet, so I couldn't Google all of the easy listening stations. I think there was a publication I think called Radio and Records and something like that had listings of by format of the radio stations that you could purchase or subscribe to. But I called all of them and got to talk to the program directors and told them what I had and sent them a copy of Rachel's Song. 100% of them said they loved it. They played it, put it in rotation. I even got it to Bonneville Broadcasting, which was doing the programming for about 400 stations around the country.
Oh.
And that guy, I forget his name, but he's no longer living, but he loved Rachel's Song. And once he put it into the program rotation at Bonneville, instantly 400 stations started playing it. Well, my mailbox started getting fan mail. People would call the station and want to know, how do you get a hold of this guy Combs? I want to know more about this Rachel's Song. And so we started getting fan mail. And there again, it was one of those things where things kind of just start stacking up and you realize there's more to this that I need to do than just let this alone. And the next thing we needed to do was to record some more music. Just all I had at the time was Rachel's Song. And I realized I was 34 years old when I wrote Rachel's Song, and nobody had ever told me that I could write music. Now, I had been a choir director in high school and college, and even in part-time when I came to work for Western Electric. I've been around music all my life. I sung in the choir at the university, and, but nobody had ever said, Dave, why don't you try writing some music? Nobody had ever said that. So
I'm glad nobody told you that you couldn't. I mean, that's actually a good thing.
Now
Yes.
that is important, because you've heard the many stories of people whose whole careers were stunted when somebody told them, you'll never make anything. You'll never do this. You'll never do that. It took them 30 or 40 years before they proved them wrong. But in my case, I was 34 before I even wrote my first one. So I thought, well, if I can write one, I know there's got to be some more. So sure enough, I sat down at the piano and wrote more. And by 1988, I had enough to do a whole album. So I have an album called Rachel's Song that has Rachel's Song as the first track on it, and some more songs that I've written. Mm-hmm. And then I decided, well, now it's getting played on the radio all over the place. People want to buy it. And to start with, people
I'm kind of surprised they weren't complaining, like, where can I find this in the store? I can't find this anywhere.
You can't find it. And people were wanting it, and I didn't have a CD at the time when I just had Rachel's Song. All I had was a cassette. People would say, can you make me a copy? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll do that. Well, I've got over here in my studio, I still have it. It's a two cassette machine. You put the master over here and a blank one here, and you push record, and it copies the cassette. Well, I did that, and of course, that's real time. So for a 3 minute and 45 second song, it takes 4 minutes and 45 seconds to make one copy. Well, I made dozens of copies, and I'd sell it to them for the cost of the tape or whatever, but they just loved it. So after a while, I said, I cannot spend all my time over here punching record on this cassette duplicator machine. So I ended up, thank goodness, with the additional songs in 1988, having enough to do a mass production CD and cassette tape. So then I was able to order cassettes and CDs by the pallet load, and it wasn't very long before I did need to order 5,000 at a time. Mm. And so, but then the question was, how do you get the cassettes out so people can buy it? Well, I was pretty naive, Walt and Cindy. I thought, this song is so popular on the radio, and I get all these fan mail things. I'm going to walk into Record Bar or these fancy record stores, and they're going to greet me at the door and say, Dave, where have you been? We've been waiting for you to come in, and so we can sell your music and take care of you. Nope. That didn't happen. They never heard of me. All they were interested in was the big names, the Michael Jacksons and the big popular pop stars with the music with going on tour and all that kind of thing. So a lot of them wouldn't return my phone calls. They gave me no encouragement when I'd see them in person. And I was getting pretty discouraged about how in the world am I going to find a way to get people to be able to buy my music. Well, fortunately, I was working at the time in Maryland, in the state of Maryland, working for Western Electric. And the lady behind me, in my cubicle right behind me, had a friend who owned a gift shop. And she said, Dave, would you give me one of the Rachel's Song CDs and let me give it to my friend Jane that owns a gift shop? I said, well, sure. So I gave her a CD, and I didn't think much about it. And then a couple of days later, I get a phone call, and it's Jane, the owner of the store. And she says, Dave, you and I've got to talk about how I can get some of your CDs and cassette tapes to sell to my customers. She said, I play music in my store. I play John Phillips. The name of the store was called America. She sold a patriotic Americana stuff. You may have been in one of her stores. I think there are several of them around on the Atlantic coast. It's called America. It used to be in National Airport. There was one, but she played a patriotic music. Well, and she had a 5 CD changer. So she popped Rachel's Song in amongst the other 4 patriotic CDs. And she says, every time your CD comes on, all the customers in the store go, what is that? And they go traipsing over to the counter and say, Jane, do you have that? What's that music? Do you have it for sale? And so, of course, she didn't. So that's why she called me. She says, you got to sell me some CDs and tapes. And so I said, okay. We reached an agreement on the price. And that evening, Linda and I jumped in the car and took her a box of CDs and tapes of Rachel's song. Well, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. And about a week later, I get another phone call from Jane, and she says, Dave, those are all gone. I need more. How about doubling the order this time? So next, we made that trip every week, probably for well over a year, and then taking her boxes of tapes and CDs. And of course, I love going to Old Town Alexandria. There's a
it's gorgeous
restaurant, Landini Brothers, and all the great places to eat, and just a fabulous town.
Yep.
So we love going, but she sold thousands of tapes and CDs in that one little gift shop, just playing that one cassette tape or playing that one CD. Well, now I have my MBA from Wake Forest University, and I'm a business person. As you can tell from my background in math and physics, I'm a mathematician, a scientist. I'm very analytical. And so I said, I've got to analyze what's happening here. So I took what the gift shop had done. I knew how many CDs she was selling, how many cassettes, how much it cost me, how much I sold them to her for. You multiply all that out, and I could calculate my gross profit on her sales. And it was a attractive number there. And so it was a business model and one column in a spreadsheet, basically. Very simple. And so I said, well, Linda, do you think there might be one gift shop like Jane's in every state in the country? So we reckon we could find 50. So I made me another column in my spreadsheet. Column B is column A times 50. Well, down at the bottom, the gross profit number. Well, that's an interesting number. That's looking pretty good. I said, well, what if there are just five gift shops in every state? 250 times column 1. And I said, Linda, come here. Look at this. That's more than double what I make at AT&T. And I said, okay, I think I see the light here. I know what we need to do. This business model works at at one, and all I have to do now is duplicate it. And so that was the beginning of my aha moment of realizing that here's the business model. Here's what I need to do. Now, I didn't know how to find all these other gift shops. I knew there probably was tons of them around, but I didn't know how to find them. So what we did, Linda and I, on the weekends, we would go to all these little tourist towns around Annapolis, Maryland. In Tennessee, you'd go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Blowing Rock, North Carolina, places like that are known tourist places. And so we would go into these little towns on a weekend, and I'd go on one side of the street and she'd go on the other, and we'd just pop into these little gift shops, and I'd stop and listen. Now, if I heard pretty music playing, then I was encouraged to explore it further to find out, did they sell any of the music they were playing? And if not, would they consider it? And I had a little paper bag of cassette tapes that I could leave them one and let them try it. So we basically prospect up and down these streets of these little tourist towns on weekends. And I grew from one gift shop. I had probably eventually in a few weeks, I had about 20 some.
Nice.
And so these people, they were playing it, and sure enough, they were selling just like in Jane's shop did. And so I said, well, we're running out of places that we could drive to. You can only do so much shoe leather and car driving to get to these places. So Linda says, well, here we are in the Washington, D.C. area. Go down to the Library of Congress. They've got every phone book in the world. Get to the Yellow Pages and look up gift shops in all these towns that you want to find out about. Okay. So I went down to D.C., the Library of Congress, and I made Xerox copies of the Yellow Pages for gift shops in a number of towns. And I'd take those copies back home, and on the weekend, I would start calling, and I'd say, I can tell you exactly what I said. I said it about 1 million times, but I think I could say it in my sleep.
I'm sure.
Do you sell any music of the cassette tapes you play in your shop? And they'd either say no, in which I'd say, do you play music? And they'd say, well, no. And in which well, thank you very much, and hang up. Or if they did play it, And I said, do you sell it? And they'd say, no. Have you considered, do people ask about it? Do they? Oh, well, sometimes. So I would frequently get them to talk them into at least trying one, and I'd get their name and address and mail them a little packet. And then occasionally I'd get somebody that did play and sell. And I would have to make 30 phone calls to get one prospect. 30. So you get used to hearing no 29 times, and then there's the 30th one that says, yes, I'd like to try it. So I did that for weekends on time, and I said, there's got to be a better way. A lot of these places, they're not interested. 1 out of 30 is not a big hit rate. And so I said, well, Linda, what is the characteristic of the ideal shop that we need to play and sell our music? And we thought, and we said, well, they need new customers, first of all. It needs to be in a pleasant environment, usually in a tourist town or a tourist area where they cater to people coming in for the first time and maybe last time into their shop. And I said, well, how do we find out where all these tourist towns are in the United States? You know, we know about Maryland and Virginia and Tennessee and North Carolina, but that's only 4 or 5 states. So I said, well, I got to find out. So I called the Chamber of Commerce people. I called the Better Business Bureau. I called everybody that would have anything to do with businesses in the states or the part of the country. Nobody had a list of tourist towns. I mean, they thought I was asking for something crazy or something, but tourist towns, no, we don't have a list of those. So I said, well, now here's where my analytical and my MBA kicked in. I said, well, all right, I know I can figure this out. What are the characteristics of a tourist town? Now you think about this. How many gift shops are in a tiny little town? Probably like Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I bet you there's probably 50, 70. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Every shop down there, there's a lot. Number 2, how many permanent residents live in a tourist town? Not very many, right? I mean, they might have, 200 or 300 people live in Gatlinburg, or probably more than that, but there's no way in the world that low a number of population can support that many gift shops. And so I said, okay, that's the 2 numbers I need. So I said, all right, I just need to know where all the gift shops are. And I did find out I could purchase the mailing list. Back then you had to buy a printout.
Right.
You couldn't get a tape, or you couldn't Google. There was no Google back then. So I bought a printout. I think it cost me a couple $100, which is a lot of money, but it was worth it because the printout was about 4 inches thick.
Oh,
75,000 gift shops in the entire country, the whole Yellow Pages for the entire country, printed alphabetical by town within state. So then I had the gift shops. So then I could go through the printout and say, all right, in this town, I just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were just 15 gift shops, and write it down. And so I made me a spreadsheet, the name of the town, how many gift shops. And so all the way through, I went through the whole thing. It took a long time.
Yeah.
And then I said, I need to know what the population is. So I said, I think if you want to find out something, go to a library. Ask a librarian. They know everything. So I went to the library, which happened to be across the street from where I was working at the time, at lunch one day. And this librarian, she says, well, over here's this book called The Marketing Atlas. And it's a great big, I don't know if you've ever seen one or not, but it's about 2.5 feet by 3 feet, about this thick, weighs 12 pounds. But it has the detailed maps of the entire country, and also a listing of every little crossroad. I don't mean town. I mean like every little crossroad that has a census number attached to it. So that book had all the population data that I needed. So I said, well, so I ended up buying my own copy of one of those books because I couldn't spend all day long over at the library doing this. So at home, I'd take my spreadsheet and take the town. I'd look up the population, put column 3 over here is the population. And I did that for all of those gift shops. Then I created a third column where I just said, okay, computer, you calculate for me the ratio of the population per gift shop. Okay. Give me a number. Then sort my spreadsheet by state by that ratio. And
Yep.
guess what? Like cream rising to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Tennessee, there's Gatlinburg. Over in North Carolina, there's Blowing Rock. And in Virginia, there's different places. And in Maryland, there was, Occoquan, all those kind of places. And so I had then a printout that gave me where the tourist towns were. I could say, all right, I want to know everybody with a ratio of that no more than 150 people per gift shop. That 150 or less. And so that would give me enough to call for a long time. Started calling that, and guess what? And I had, my printout had the phone numbers. So I already had the phone numbers all on my printout.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd speed dial. This is back in the day when I didn't have cell phone. It was on a manual dial thing here. I speed dialed the area code and the prefix because every gift shop in there had the same area code in the next 3 digits. So I put that in there. And so all I had to do was key in the 4 digits.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would call them, do you sell any cassette tapes of the music you play in your shop? And go through that whole routine. My hit rate went from 1 in 30 to 1 in 5.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. Now you talk about really feeling good. I did. And sometimes it was even better than that because these were tourist towns.
Sure.
And that was their livelihood, of selling whatever the customers wanted. Well, I grew my gift shop list then using that from a handful to eventually over 1,000 gift shops across the entire country. And so that's what enabled me in 1992 to be able to quit my job and do my music full time for the next 10 years. And it was just a marvelous thing. But as you can tell, it was no straight line, and it sure wasn't easy, but you just have to keep working at it and thinking outside the box and saying there's got to be a way, and you'll find a way. And I think this is the name of your podcast is perfect. The law of attraction. You will, if you keep imagining and thinking positive about it, it will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You persevered. You stuck with the dream. You didn't doubt. When things didn't work out, you just said, okay, well, I just found another way not to sell my CDs and my cassette tapes. I mean, that's all there was to that. That was great. I love that.
Yeah.
What a story. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sorry I made it such a long story, but it is it's all so connected.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed every bit of it. And I love recognizing the perseverance. Just that you just kept going and kept taking action and kept making calls and kept, not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
How many people would have given up, but, and I had a lot of good memories of tape duplication days in recording studios that were way too expensive.
Yeah.
Coming out of the studio with that one cassette tape and saying, we got to find out who has a tape duplicator, and then ended up in some industrial complex somewhere, waiting for like 5 hours to get a handful of cassettes. Yeah. Good times.
Let me tell you another story about an attraction that happened. There was, and this, I had not planned this, at some point you can imagine I had a full-time employee and had to answer the phone. People were calling my 800 number all day long to place orders for my music. And one day I happened to be answering the 800 number, and the lady on the other end of the line, she says, "Hi, my name is Roberta Messner, and let me tell you about what your music has done for me." And she told me about her ailment. She had a disease. I think the common name for it was elephantitis. Your skin attacks itself, and she had to have dozens of surgeries. It's very painful. And she said, your music had really gotten me through tons of painful experiences with my predicament. And she said, I just want to tell you what your music meant to me. And she was very curious, a little more curious than most callers. And she said, tell me more about your music and your story. And so I told her a little bit about the writing of Rachel's song and all that. And then she says, well, that is very interesting. And she said, let me tell you, I am a writer for Guideposts magazine.
Ooh.
And of course, everybody knows about Guidepost magazine. It's the really neat little magazine that you find, laying in doctor's offices or all over the place. and nobody ever throws them away because they're full of great stories. But she says, I love your story. Would you allow me to pitch your story to the editors of Guideposts?
Nice.
If they, it sounds like the kind of story they love to print. I said, well, sure. She said, well, I'll need to interview you several times and we'll do that. So she did. She connected up a few days later that we spent 2 or 3 hours on the phone. And then she wrote it all up and the story, and she pitched it to the editors, and she called me back and she says, they love it. They want me to do it. So I said, okay, great. So she got busy, and now the byline is my line, as if I wrote it, but she's kind of the ghostwriter. She wrote it for me, basically. And so she submitted the article to Guideposts. And then I didn't think much about it for a while. And then I get a phone call from a guy that says, I'm the editor of Guideposts and we need some photographs to put in the magazine. And I thought, okay, now they're serious. So I didn't have any professional photos of me and my whatever. So my wife, I sat down at the piano and my wife took a picture with my Nikon camera, me sitting at the piano. And then we went out in the backyard and I set my tripod up and me and my wife and holding my little kitty cat and took a little picture of us in the backyard, sent those off to Guideposts, and then didn't think much about it for a while. And then in September, the issue that it came out in is September of 1994. And this came out in August. If I look back at my calendar, I could probably tell you to the day and minute that it
I'm sure.
hit the street. Because in the back of the magazine, the editor says, well, we always put in the back a little thing for the readers to connect with the writers of the stories. So it's if you want to contact the author, here's how to get a hold of them. I said, okay, well, you'll put my address and phone number in the back of the magazine. Well, the minute that magazine hit the street, my 800 number started ringing.
Oh my.
And I'd pick it up and I've just got your Guidepost article. I want to order a cassette tape of Rachel's song. And I'd take the order and hang it up, ding-a-ling, pick it up again. That phone rang and it didn't stop ringing. After a short while, you didn't have to wait for it to ring. You just pick it up. Somebody's there. I mean, it was unbelievable. I had to hire 2 retired ministers' wives to help me answer the phone for all those orders that were coming in. I mean, all day long. And then a couple of days later, my front doorbell rings and I go upstairs and to the door and there's my mailman. And he's standing there holding this great big gray canvas bag, like you've probably seen at the post office that they carry the mail around in. And it's so heavy, he can't even pick it up. And he says, Dave, what have you done? And I said, well, I just wrote a little article in Guidepost magazine. He said, well, this bag is full of letters to you, from people all over the world. And he said, I've never seen this happen before. And so my wife and I stayed up all night just zipping open. We had one of those little zip things that you could open an envelope, zipping them open, pull the contents out, put a paper clip on it. 6:00 in the morning, we finally finished going through that bag of mail. Everything, every letter in there had a $10 check for a cassette or $14 for a CD. I mean, 99% of them were ordering, and they'd never heard it. They'd only read the article that appeared in. I mean, that blew my mind, So in 2 weeks' time, we had heard from over 10,000 people.
Wow.
From that Guidepost article. And for years, in fact, I still occasionally will get an email from somebody that says, I found your article laying around in this Guidepost magazine from 1994. So it's just amazing. And that was no advertising. That was publicity. It tells you the power of positive publicity. And so talk about the law of attraction. That one attracted a tremendous, just the connection between me and Roberta Messner, the author, was just amazing. And now we have become really good friends, and we've done other things together, and she is just in fact, if you Google Roberta Messner Guidepost, she has her own article and her own story in, I think it's last May of last year's issue of Guideposts. So, but anyway, that was just and that really put the retail sales and my mailing list of customers, potential customers, on the map. I mean, I suddenly went from, just 10,000 fans. I probably went to 26,000 and nothing flat. So then every year during the 90s, went back to Nashville and recorded another album. And it was either an original that I wrote the music, or I did albums of favorite hymns. And so I've got 4 albums of my favorite hymns. And so every year we got a new album. We'd do a mailing list, physical mail. This is before email and any kind of electronic thing, out to I think the last mailing I did was something like 27,000 people and that's a lot of letters. I had to go hire a mailing company to put it all together and print it and do the electronic, put it in the mail in the post office. But early on, I did a survey of my customers and asked them, I said, well, if I do some more music, what's your probability of buying a new album from me? I wanted to know, did I have a one-off thing?
Was it worth it? Yeah.
Is it going to be worth it or not? And I had some summer MBA students that they did this as a summer project. They did a random sample survey of my customers.
Oh, nice.
They did a great job, and it gave them some good experience and gave me some good information. Do you know that almost 100% of my fans at that point said, you come out with another one, we're going to buy it. So wow. I knew that, well, I got to get busy and I got to come out with another album as soon as I can. So that was the beginning of the marketing and realizing the power of publicity and actually coming up with new products and sending things out to your mailing list. And that was about the time that I was able to quit my job at AT&T and say, I'm doing this full time. And I haven't looked back. It's just been a wonderful experience. It really has.
That is fabulous. Oh my goodness. What a great story. I love that
so much. Yeah. So great. And I haven't heard Rachel's song yet.
Oh, well, bless, as we say around here, well, bless your heart. You got to do something about that.
And I want to know how this has affected Rachel's life.
No, I have been very protective of her privacy, as you can imagine. So I don't reveal where she is or what her last name is or anything about that.
Oh, of course not. Right.
I can tell you that she always calls this is my song.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
He was just a baby, and that is just the coolest thing ever, Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep.
Is there a way to pick up your song and play it? 'Cause we can do a screen share here in order to play it, but I'm not sure what you've got at your end that will enable you to do that.
Well, I do have it. Let's see here. If you want to do that, let me.
At the bottom of your web page here, you'll see a little share button, and you should be able to do a share there.
All right, let me do a share. I'm going to do a video file. And I want to do
Beautiful.
Lovely.
It's beautiful. And I'm going to have the song in my head now. And I'm imagining that Walt is going to go away and begin playing this now.
Actually, what was going through my head was this is like it was the early part of the digital era. I mean, the internet was just starting up. Nothing had really gotten going where you could certainly have tried to sell this on the net yet. It wasn't there yet. Right. And so you were right on the cusp of that. And so therefore it was before the word viral became a word.
Yes.
You have a tune before viral was a thing. You had something that went viral sort of non-digitally, which is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Well, thank you. Did the sound come through okay on that?
It came through okay, yeah.
I can hear it, yeah.
Yeah. It was perhaps the best fidelity, but we certainly got the good sense of what the song was like.
The noise reduction, the anti-echo probably kicks in and does it.
Yeah.
But you get the idea anyway.
Yes.
That was beautiful. But as far as I'm concerned, the even better part is just the story. Thanks for sharing that story. That was a really wonderful, inspiring story.
Inspiring. I was just going to say, I am starting some new things in my life at this age, and it's like very inspiring to recognize again and again that, if you can do anything, if you just believe that you can do it, and if you stick with it, and if you have that vision of it having success. And so thank you so much for coming today and sharing your story with us. It's wonderful.
Well, I'm honored to be here. This has been a whole lot of fun. I knew it would be. And I'm just so happy to share the stories. And I hope that the people watching the program will check the music out at combsmusic.com and check my book out on Amazon. It's the book's on Amazon.com, and it's been a bestseller on Amazon. And Rachel's song, of course, you can hear it, you can purchase it on downloads, but you can also listen to it on streaming on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, all of these streaming facilities. You can listen to Rachel's song and all my music. So, and I even have piano music books that people can play the piano. I've transcribed my albums for piano, so that you can do that too.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
That's excellent. Of course, now we're in 2022, so we can actually link to this stuff, so they'll make it really easy. So I'll put links in the description so people can find their way. Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, I really appreciate that, Walt and Cindy. It's great to spend some time with you all, and it's been a wonderful afternoon.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, very much appreciate it. So, nothing else to say. That was a great story. I mean, you did it all for yourself. I mean, we could just sit back and enjoy. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you.
All right. So thank you all very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.